Hello, and today I'm going to be overviewing Season 1 of the Lost Stories, 8 stories from Colin Baker's Lost Stories, and obviously there's another 3. Now this is going to be quite a controversial video because some of these stories are quite famous in the Lost Stories terms, like the Nightmare Fair mission to Magnus. Those types of stories are quite well known, and some of them are going to be in quite weird places, so it's going to be quite controversial, this list, especially number 1. Number 1's going to be very controversial. So without further ado, let's begin the overview. So let's see what's at 8th place. So before I reveal number 8, I'm just going to say that most of the stories in Season 1 of the Lost Stories are in the same format as Season 22, you know, each part being 45 minutes long. There are only 2 stories in this season. What are 4 parts, which are Song of the Megaphra and Paradise 5. So at number 8 we have Paradise 5. Now this is a good little murder mystery story with some nice little twists in it. Obviously the Doctor is going to see his old friend, but something's happened to his old friend, and the story itself sort of reminds me of the Macra Terror. As the story progresses, you'll sort of understand what I mean by that. Alex McQueen's in it, playing this character called Gabriel, who is this creepy and quite camp. I mean, he starts off rather sinister, but as the story progresses he becomes a bit more camp and a bit more pantomime-esque. Really got these nice alien creatures there. Perry goes undercover, and everything's, you know, too good to be true really for it. And the cherubs, they're quite a big part of the plot, so I won't go into too much detail about them, and I think that it's quite interesting that the start of it is in this sort of barren sort of volcanic planet, and then you've got this sort of nice paradise sort of hotel-y sort of place in space really. So yeah, it's good really, but I just think the story drags in places, so I'm going to give Paradise 5 a 5 out of 10. Number 7 we have Song of the Megaphra. Now when I read the synopsis for this I thought, oh god, it's going to be Beast Below, but it's completely different to that. I mean, the story itself I think was going to be originally for a Tom Baker, you know, way back with Douglas Adams, but they couldn't figure a way of doing it, and I think that it got pushed into season 19, and obviously that didn't get made, and then it got pushed to Colin, and it just collapsed and never got made, and Colin's finally done it now. I think that it's such an imaginative story with, you know, these sort of civilizations living inside, you know, the Megaphra, and it sort of reminds me of Planet of the Ood in some respects, and it's quite obvious why they didn't do it, because obviously you can imagine them trying to construct, you know, inside a whale, and you've got these giant spaceships in it, so it's a bit sort of like Moby Dick with them trying to capture the Megaphra. So it's quite good. I mean, I quite like the fungal creature in it, who provides some quite a good few sort of cliffhangers. The computer in it does sort of annoy me, it's sort of a bit annoying, but Song of the Megaphra, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. It's a good story, but it's certainly not the best of the Lost Stories. Number 6 we have Leviathan. Now from the trailer I was most anticipating this story because it sounded fantastic, and I just love the setting of this story. Now to me, I think that this story would have worked a lot better if it stayed in the one setting it was in. I love the sort of opening sequence of this bloke being chased by Hearn, the hunter, this sort of skeleton person. It sort of reminds me of the android from The Visitation, but I feel that this story itself gives everything away in part 1. When it comes to part 2, there's nothing to give. Honestly, I just feel that part 2 drags, and that this story could have easily worked as just being a one-parter, because I just think that 45 minutes is too long when you already know everything what happened in part 1. I mean, part 1 is just superb, and I think that this occurs with most Lost Stories for me, but part 1 is superb. When it comes to part 2, it's just a bit of a mishmash really. So yeah, I think that it's a good story nonetheless, but I think I would have preferred it if it stayed in the one setting. But if they had to keep the twist, maybe have left the twist a bit later on instead of give everything away in part 1, because I think that the story would have worked a lot more better and would have built up a bit more better, really. So yeah, Leviathan. At number 5 we have Mission to Magnus. This is quite a well-known lost story, where we see Syl collaborate with the Ice Warriors. Now Syl is fantastic in this story, with him sort of being on the side of the people who are on Magnus, who are all female, and as soon as the Ice Warriors come into the story, he turns sides to the Ice Warriors. So he's very devious in this, as you would expect with Syl. Now I've got a bit of criticism for the 6th Doctor, and it does seem a bit out of place with the 6th Doctor, because when the 6th Doctor encounters another TARDIS, who is Ansel, the Doctor's sort of a person who bullied the Doctor at the Academy, and you just see Colin Baker just hide under the control room, under the console, and it just seems a bit out of place for the 6th Doctor, really. And this story's got quite a lot going on. If you think the Syl and Ice Warriors isn't enough, that we've got slavery, because this planet is predominantly, well, this planet is full of women who rule the planet, and you've got these young boys who are basically slaves for them, and the Doctor's got to try and save, stop slavery happening, who are in captivity, and obviously stop Syl discovering the secrets of time travel, which sort of follows on into the Antidote to Oblivion. But Mission to Magnus is a fantastic story. I love the Ice Warriors and Syl. I would have loved to have seen this actually on screen, because it seems such an 80s story. And I'm a huge fan of the Ice Warriors, so it would have been nice to have seen the Ice Warriors battle Colin Baker, and it's nice that it's finally been adapted. And Mission to Magnus is a truly great story. I really do like it. Now we're at the halfway point, so at number 4 is the Macross, the final story of season 1. And I absolutely love this. I thought this was one I was absolutely dreading. I thought I won't enjoy this whatsoever. But part 1 is so fantastic. I think the first part clocks up to about 50 minutes. And I just think it's such a fantastic romp of a story, with the Doctor and Perry landing in this sort of time flux going on, with stuff going on. And I think that this is based on a true event, with this ship going invisible, and this sort of ghost ship appearing. I think that it's really good, with this sort of creepy green rust and fog all around it, so it's quite atmospheric, with the Doctor mostly exploring the ship in part 1, and then you're introduced to this society in another dimension, what are leeching off the power of the ship, which I think is fantastic. And I think part 1's cliffhanger is brilliant. What happens to Perry, it's just great. Really, I do love it. And you've got this really sort of sinister and corrupt villain called Oslu, who's this female character who will do anything in a way to be the most powerful, person on her planet, and she's quite a old tyrant character, brilliantly played by Linda Marlowe. And Colin's fantastic in this. It's got some nice bits of comedy in it. You've got Perry trying to be an opera singer. What more do you want? It's just a fantastic story, and I'm quite sad that I thought, oh god, it's going to be terrible. I love the Macross, it's great, and it's quite a nice way to finish a lost story. So yeah, Macross. So we've reached the top 3. So what is number 3? The Nightmare Fair. Now this is a well-known story where we see the 6th Doctor battle with the Celestial Toymaker, and this, I'm going to say, is like Leviathan. Part 1 is just superb. I love part 1 because it's just Perry and the Doctor mucking around in Blackpool, going on rides. I mean, the concept art shows that, and it's just great. And it shows, the 6th Doctor and Perry's bond, and I like that aspect to it. Part 2, I think, just drops a bit. I mean, I think that it's very interesting, seeing all the games being played, and the Celestial Toymaker's reveal is very good. It's like a proper traditional classic reveal where we see, we just hear him, watching the Doctor's every move. And I think that it's an interesting idea of Celestial Toymaker having control of, Blackpool's pleasure beats, all the rides and stuff. I think that's very interesting. And I think that, from what I remember, it incorporates the sort of... No, it doesn't. Sorry, I've gone off topic. The Celestial Toymaker is brilliant in this, played by David Bally, who I think this is his first time. I'm not sure if Solitaire was first or this, but he's fantastic in this. He does a great job. Being the Celestial Toymaker, being this quite comical, I suppose he's sort of comical, but he's got this sinister edge to him. And there's this character called the Chef, from what I remember, and he's longing to die. But it just shows that you've got to, you know, the Celestial Toymaker, as soon as you're in the game, you are his plaything, you are his entertainment. You know, that he can keep you alive for eternity and just make you keep on playing games, because this character, the chef, just wants to die. He's fed up of being, you know, in this environment. He just wants to die. So it's sort of a relief when he finally does die. So it just shows the Celestial Toymaker is rather sinister, and once you're in his game, you can't get out unless the Celestial Toymaker says so. So it's very interesting. Colin does fantastic against the Celestial Toymaker, and again, I would have loved to have seen this actually be made, because I just think it's such a well-known lost story, and I'm happy that it's adapted, but I think it would be even better seeing it. I mean, I personally would have loved to have seen the so-called season 23, the Lost series, because that just seems a lot better than Trial of the Time Lord with the Nightmare Fair mission to Magnus, you know, yellow fever and how to cure it. You know, it just sounded a lot more of a fantastic series, and I would have loved to have seen yellow fever and how to cure it, but obviously that only got to the title and the planning stages. We didn't actually have, you know, much to go off on that, so obviously Big Finish could adapt it. But Nightmare Fair, definitely very good. Part 1 is definitely the standout part for me, but part 2 just drops a bit, but it's very interesting to see how Celestial Toymaker works on audio. Number 2, we have The Hollows of Time. Now this, I think it's really underrated. I mean, it's only getting 2 or 3 stars on Amazon, but I really do like it, because I think that it's a very clever story. The music is very 80s, and it is very reminiscent of Frontios for obvious reasons. So the Tractators are back in it, but the Tractators, you might be put off by them, but they're not really in it. They're only dead. You know, they're only pointed out by the characters. There's nobody voicing the Tractators, and I like the build-up of it, and I like that this story would have challenged the visual effects department because of all the stuff going on, and it would have been very visually interesting to have seen. And I love the whole the sort of mystery going around this village, with the sort of sand creatures obviously being the Tractators, but I think part 1 is just superb, but part 2, it's a little bit down, it goes a little bit downhill, but I think that the cliffhanger is brilliant to it. Professor Stream, played by David Garfield, who does a wonderful job, and is a little an acronym for something, for some villain, and he's just played brilliantly. Obviously it's only hinted that it is that villain, but as soon as you work out the little anagram for it, it just becomes brilliant. So yeah, Hollows of Time I think is a good story, underrated in my eyes. I just think it's just superb for me, really, and I love that it shows Colin's brash side. I think but this story is most like TV Colin. The rest are sort of Big Finish Colin, a bit softer, but this is him, you know, showing his broad and intelligence and arrogant side. I just like that to it, and I've got to do a little special shout out to the person who played Simon, Susan Sheridan, who plays this 11-year-old, and it is superb. You can obviously think, you always thought, oh, they got an 11-year-old to voice it, but it's actually, you know, a 50-year-old woman, which is quite bizarre, and she does a fantastic job, and Simon is quite a big part of the plot, and does a fantastic job. So yeah, Hollows of Time I think would have been very interesting to have seen how they would have done it, because Christopher H. Bidmead wanted to challenge how far they could have gone effects wise, and this story really does push the boundaries, and you can see why the story didn't get made with all these visual stuff going on. Obviously if you've listened to the story you'll know what I mean, with this car in space and all that, so that would have been very interesting to have seen. So Hollows of Time, number 2. Point of Entry just seems like a Philip Hinchcliffe story. It's very gothic, and Mark Platt has just captured the gothic feel to it. It reminds me of the Shakespeare Code with this person called Christopher Marlowe, who's a playwright, and he sort of sold his soul to know these dark secrets. You know, and I think that it's very good that, and it's got this fantastic sort of Spanish villain. Obviously, with this being in Elizabethan England time, you know, we had the Spanish Armada, and this is a couple of years after, so the Spanish were quite sort of enemies of the English, so it's quite interesting having this Spanish villain. Don Lorenzo, and he's a very interesting villain because he's a man so lost, he's deeply lost in dark secrets. Even death rejects him. As you can see, he's sort of like a skeleton person, because in some scenes, his flesh is peeling off, and he's sort of becoming a sort of like the decayed master and the deadly assassin. So that provides some interesting scenes in it, and it's a gothic traditional story, and Mark Platt does fantastic at gothic stories because he wrote the Silver Turks, spare parts and quite bleak stories. And this is a story where history meets the aliens, a story with alien science wavering between human supernatural beliefs, which I think is interesting, incorporating the supernatural and aliens together and our human beliefs. So I think that's very interesting. You've got Perry pretending to be Queen Elizabeth, which is just quite an interesting thing to see. And we've got the Aztec blade. It's quite, you can see why this story didn't get made, because you've got people hovering over Tudor England, so it's would be quite an expensive story to make, and obviously it works well on audio, and obviously this sort of Aztec blade, and the trailer for this sounds fantastic. If you want to know, you just listen to the trailer and you'll understand it has this quite horrific feel to it, and yeah, I absolutely love Point of Entry. So there we have it, my Lost Stories overview for Season 1. I've quite enjoyed doing this video, hope you guys have enjoyed it. I'll probably overview Season 4 next, unless I get the other audios before, which I doubt. So the next Lost Story overview will be of Season 4, which was only 4 stories, so it's quite nice to overview, but nice on the 6-parters. So yeah, thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you in my next missing episode or Lost Stories video to celebrate them in November. So thank you very much for watching. Take care, stay awesome, because you're all brilliant people. So for now, goodbye!